Saying that it's not all angst that's coming into the BBC inbox. SC Mehta in Indy says, I'm very optimistic about the outcome. The most heartening thing is that all 196 countries of our world are determined to do their best to start acting immediately on this issue. But Anna, do you get the impression that all countries are really doing their best by the whole world? Isn't it inevitable they're doing their best by themselves first and foremost?
I think they're heading in the right direction, but because dates are so important, they're really dragging their feet. I mean, we know that America it looks as if they're going to be reducing their emissions by about 4% by 2020, which is no good at all. And they're offering this money, they're supposed to be participating in this $100 billion fund to help developing countries. But it's contingent on, for example, China doing certain things. There seems to be a lot of blackmail going on, and I think a lot of dishonesty. And I agree with the people who are saying we can't actually see what they're promising to do.
You're just turning on, you're watching BBC World News, and this is World Have Your Say. We're inevitably today discussing what's happening in Copenhagen, in some cases what isn't happening. Ban Ki-moon is suggesting that the negotiators and some of the leaders may have to stay on way beyond the scheduled close of play to try and get a deal. Let's bring in Inge. He's in Norway. We spoke to him at the beginning of the summit. Let's speak to you again, Inge. Are you heartened by what you've seen or disappointed?
Well, I don't know if I actually expected a deal, but what I think is very important is that the process which is going on, will make people think different, and I think in that concern, this Copenhagen conference has been very important.
Inge, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. And I'd also like to say thank you to Mark Kember, who is speaking to us live from Copenhagen. He's had to go because this, as you can imagine, the studio line from Copenhagen is incredibly busy with lots of different BBC News outlets. But thanks to you, Mark. And we're going to bring in Julian Wong. He's live in Washington, D.C. He's from the Center for American Progress. Some of you will know him as a blogger on the Green Leap Forward. Thank you for joining us. How do you react to what's happened over the past week and a half?
Well, I think, it's pretty hard to say, really, from the outside looking in, what to expect at the final end, because, until the ministers come in and until the heads of states come in, the negotiators really are on a tight leash. Now that 119 heads of states are actually in Copenhagen, I think we've seen some hopeful comments this morning by several heads of states that something will move forward. The political will is certainly there. We haven't had this sort of level of engagement in terms of participation of top-level officials in a long time. And I'm optimistic, actually, that something will come of it.
Julian, let me read you this email from Patrick in Vancouver. He says, and we talked about this on yesterday's World Have Your Say radio programme on the BBC. Patrick says, the very nature of mankind makes it impossible to ever reach a consensus on an issue like this. Would you agree with that?
Well, this certainly is an extremely difficult test and challenge to reaching consensus. And, quite frankly, we've seen how this has played out in the past decade and a half, almost past 2 decades, in trying to forge a global consensus on climate change. But I do think that now more than ever, the science of climate change is clear. No country, every country, believes that this is going to be a threat. But more importantly, I think more and more countries are starting to see the economic opportunity of actually transforming into a lower carbon economy. And I think if we frame the whole challenge in terms of what are the benefits of acting on climate change, then I think we can further rope in a global agreement.
So that's interesting. You say if you frame the point correctly, then people will be persuaded it's in their interest. But I wonder, Raghu in Delhi, do you feel that human nature, selfishness, whether it's as an individual or as a country, is actually standing in the way of any deal being made here?
I was actually straining at the leash to say this, but in fact, it is in the self-interest of all nations to combine together to come up with a solution which will be a solution for the world, because this is not a national issue. Cutting down Indian emissions is not going to solve the problem of climate change in India. It requires the whole world to contribute to it. But in response to one of the things that was said earlier, I am afraid I was not particularly impressed by the speeches made earlier this morning, because from what I heard, especially from President Obama, for instance, was a general tone of, this is what we have brought, this is what we've placed on the table, we can't do any more, take it or leave it. I'm afraid that that's not going to get us anywhere.
I'm really worried
And
that it's not about human nature.
If all the leaders
Raghu,
came together...
Raghu, just hold on with your thought a moment. I apologise for interrupting you, but Anna here is itching to respond.
I think the whole point about human nature is really a diversion, because I think if you have a market economy, I'm afraid that even if, with the best will in the world, if they came together with a brilliant agreement today, you still have the problem that you are producing for profit. You have factories like cars, for example. What happens? You say, well, we don't make cars anymore. I would like to see, for example, those resources put into transport.
And I can see up on my screen that Daniel in Berlin is also wanting to come in.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to the question of leadership. And that is the real problem we face at the moment. President Obama this morning said effectively, I've nothing new to offer. I'm not a leader, I'm a politician, and this isn't a new politics. This is old-style Washington, where the lowest common denominator
But Daniel,
rules.
with respect, and so many Americans are making this... Sorry to interrupt you, but so many Americans are making this point. He's not president of the world, he's president of America, and there's no point in him turning up in Denmark offering something which Americans don't support.
I'd like to jump in.
Well, look at the poll numbers. Americans do support real action on climate change. In fact, Obama partly got elected because he was promising real action on climate change, but he's not delivering. And I think Obama will have to face up to the fact that if he doesn't change his mind tonight and still delivers something in Copenhagen, he will have lost a huge part of his community. He will have lost a lot of progressive people in the US who are waiting for him to act and who are demanding that he acts.
Well, if you're watching in the States, you're very welcome to post on our blog. It's worldhaveyoursay.com. We'll go to Krupa as well in a moment to talk about the comment that's coming in through that blog and many others. Let's pull up an email, though. Tom is in Ohio and has got in touch with the BBC. If anyone's solution degrades the standard of living in the US, they need to wake up. Greed and democracy has made the US great. Julian, you're in Washington, D.C. How would you respond to that?
Well, I guess I would first respond by offering some clarifications. I think that there has been a fair bit of misinterpretation of what Obama is bringing to the table in terms of his climate change actions and policies. The first thing to note is that even though the 17% below 2005 levels by 2020 is translated to a 4% below 1990 levels, I think it's important to dig a little deeper and look at the legislation that's pending in the U.S. Congress.
But with respect, Julian, I'm going to interrupt you here because the point that was being made on that email wasn't about figures and policy. It was about it was a cultural point, wasn't it? That Americans like to do certain things. They like to be able to operate in a relatively free market. They like to be able to build up their own personal wealth, and they don't want to have that in any way restricted by one deal or another coming out of Copenhagen.
Well, you know, I think that after 8 years of inaction, you know, in the previous administration, I think we have to kind of recognize that the United States is starting late. Now, while it's certainly true that the Americans are used to a certain lifestyle, I do not think that Americans are unprepared to move forward in making some sacrifices. In fact, a recent poll suggested that more than 50%, it's like 55%, of Americans nationwide would be willing for the country to sign on to some ambitious emissions reduction.
Okay, so you think that the president does have the support of the bulk of the American people. Julian, stay with us. I know you're going to be with us till the end of the programme.
Which Americans? I mean, would Julian support some sort of a Tobin tax as well, where the bankers actually pay, where the people...
tax on every financial transaction?
Yeah, would Julian support that, which would protect, you know, ordinary Americans? So
well, I think the kinds of policies that the U.S. is contemplating are very clear. Congress is considering a few proposals, and all of them have very strong similarities. A pollution reduction scheme that allocates emissions rights that are capped at a certain level and ramped down over time. I think those are the kinds of policies that result in a price signal that signals to the market's transition to a low-carbon economy to invest in the kinds of low-carbon technologies that we need. And I think the American public is ready for
it,
that.
though?